everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Insidious the Red Door open up to a pretty massive amount of money. In fact, already has broken even and made profits, whereas films like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is still set to lose hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office. All of this while Sound of Freedom continues to make a pretty decent amount of money, especially when you keep in mind Angel Studios having received the distribution rights to this movie from Disney for I think around maybe $5 million or so, meaning that not only is this film already profitable in Sound of Freedom, but it's probably a lot higher than even what my charting will indicate. My charting obviously follows a typical standard, so that's what we're going to go by. But the fact that even that alone, right, even if you are insinuating that the amount of money spent by Angel Studios was not actually the budget of the movie, which was roughly $14.5 million, guess what? It's a massive win. It's a huge win for Angel Studios. It's a huge win, in this case also for Insidious, as both of them, in a very real and factual way, are destroying Indiana Jones. Now, again, I can already hear the people out there saying, but wait a minute, on paper, Indiana Jones has made well more than both of those movies combined. That very well might be true. The problem, though, is that while Indiana Jones is running in the red and is not making back its money and is not going to make back its money, in both Insidious and in the Sound of Freedom's case, guess what? Have already made their money back, have already started making profits, and are going to continue to add to those profits, whereas Indiana Jones and many, many, many other movies are just going to continue to ride off into that perpetual sunset of financial loss, ruin, and disaster. So we, of course, will update the numbers for Indiana Jones, amongst other films, and also we're to call out Tony here, because Tony is proving himself not only to be the same old Tony that we all know and love, all pun intended, but also we are going to see that he is just like all of these other mainstream media outlets that are just trying their very best to all but confirm that they have apparently an issue with kids, or at the very least with the protection of kids, with how him and many other people are treating films like Sound of Freedom. Instead of going after them because of certain objective flaws or objective failures, instead they decide to create narratives around the movie. And Tony, you're creating a narrative for this movie, and it starts to make you ask the question, what do you got against this movie, Tony? Why got such a problem with this movie? And we'll break down exactly how we can see that in the way he's written his article and also in what he's actually said about the film itself. Before any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, like that fire button, Aussie, and smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see over at Deadline, Tony, our good pal Tony, says, Insidious the Red Door slams, love the puns, on Indiana Jones with $32+ million opening. Post-COVID, there are a lot of studios that have been able to make horror work at the box office, including Paramount with Smile, Warner Brothers with Evil Dead Rise, and Universal with Megan and The Black Phone. I, again, just love the way that's worded there. But not Sony until now. Red Door is opening to $32.65 million this weekend, the second best start in the Insidious franchise, before inflation, of course, entombing, oh gosh, Tony, you're just, I feel like you must sit there with like, you know, going onto websites that give you like, hey, what are some fun puns that are connected to this specific movie title or something like that? Again, do you come up with this stuff yourself? Definitely seems like it. Going on to say that it got second place Indiana Jones to $26.5 million in its second weekend. Red Door also reps the best start in the last 2 years for a PG-13 horror movie. Now again, notice this is the starting of the article. What movies are mentioned? The first and top two movies, The Red Door and Indiana Jones. Guess what movie is not mentioned? The number 3 movie of this weekend, Sound of Freedom. All right, we're already getting started off with Tony. What's your issue? What's your problem? Especially when you have to take into account how impressive it is what Sound of Freedom has actually been able to do at the box office, especially with all of the media essentially being against the movie. I wonder why. Going on, for Blumhouse, Red Door is its 16th title to open at number 1. While tentpoles get all the glory in the post-COVID marketplace, Blumhouse continues to deliver. Sony gets props here for finally getting their hands around a franchise they've always had a financial stake in. I hear Sony Motion Pictures Group Chairman and CEO Tom Rothman selected the brilliant Daredevil release date here in between Indiana Jones and ahead of Tom Cruise summer box office cyclone in Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, what's interesting here is that you mentioned brilliant Daredevil release, and yet Indiana Jones has proven itself to not be that impressive and has actually become just a complete disappointment, a complete and utter disaster. But just going through this article, as you can see right here, no mention so far All right, we're already halfway through. Again, a lot of mention of the Red Door, a lot of mention even of talking about Indiana Jones, but so far, no mention of that. Goes on to talk about the Red Door. Obviously, Red Door being number one makes sense that it should get a lot of attention. But again, you are also mentioning here Indiana Jones in those first paragraphs. Okay, what is the next topic you're going to move on to? Wait a minute. Now you're moving on to Joyride? Wait, Joyride wasn't even in the top 3. In fact, Joyride didn't even do that well. It only made $5.8 million in comparison to all these other movies. Wait, what's going on here? It goes on to say, Lionsgate attempt to revive the raunch R-rated comedy with the Asian American title Joyride. Okay. Focused on race, are we? Is coming up greatly short. The opening is not far from Universal's Asian American comedy last summer, Easter Sunday, though that was rated PG-13, which did $5.4 million and ended at $13 million. And again, you're not adjusting for inflation there. Despite all intentions by Lionsgate to build a heartfelt, fun comedy for again, look at this. This is positive framing. Again, he is clearly liking this movie and saying, why is this movie not doing well? This doesn't make any sense at all, right? To build a heartfelt, fun comedy for diverse audiences. And guess what? No one went to go see it. No one wants to go see it. I remember seeing the trailer for this film and saying, this just looks awful. This just looks terrible. And it's because, as you say, it's a heartfelt comedy for diverse audiences. Let's just be fair here. The audiences that they have in mind here are pretty much not diverse, if we're really going to be honest here. Just because a audience that it's being directed to happens to not be white does not automatically make it diverse. Diverse means it appeals to multiple people of multiple demographics. But it's interesting and amazing how it's only diverse if it has certain people in the casting, right? It goes on to talk even further about this movie, saying, but wait a minute, it's 91% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, a B- cinema score. We all know that cinema scores don't mean anything because those statistics are complete and utter trash. And then goes on to try to justify how is it not doing well, and let's talk about all these other movies. And then, oh my goodness, look, all the way down this article, now finally you get to Sound of Freedom. Now, again, you saw that framing earlier about what they were saying and how they were talking, how Tony was talking about, again, the Asian American comedy movie that everyone should be loving, and it's meant to be a freewheeling, free-loving movie that everyone's going to enjoy for diverse audiences. All right, let's see how he framing this one. All right, Sound of Freedom, the film everyone's talking about. Okay. That is absolutely true. Will peg third place with 16.9 million and a running 6-day total of 38.9 end of day. Those are industry estimates. Angel Studios is calling the weekend at 18.2 and 40 million for 6 days. Don't know where that extra magic money is coming from. Okay. I don't remember you calling out other studios when they report their numbers. Interesting that you're seemingly only pointing out Angel Studios and calling out Angel Studios for coming up with fake numbers when you've never done this before for any other films. It goes on to say, don't know where that extra money came from, like the right-wing crowdfunding aside. Oh my goodness. So again, here you go. Right-wing crowdfunding. So you're already trying to paint this movie. If the protection of children is right-wing, then if you're not right-wing, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, think about it from a second, right? You're talking about this as being a right-wing crowdfunded movie. And yet, I can guarantee you that the people going to see this movie are of wide stripes. They're not all conservatives. They're not all Republicans. I guarantee you're having a pretty wide gambit of different politics and different, belief systems all being represented by seeing this movie. And yet you painting this as right-wing is clearly your attempt to try to dissuade people from watching this movie, because guess what? Anyone who's in the cult is going to immediately see this and say, well, okay, well, I'm not going to see that movie then if it's being funded by right-wingers. But again, I go back for a second. If you are saying that a movie about protecting children is receiving support from right wing and not everybody, that makes me start to call into question anyone that you would deem to be in the center or even the left wing, wouldn't it? Because don't you think that we should all be supporting a film about this crap, like about this nonsense, about this evil in our world? Tony, do you think so? Are you going to, make your stand on that? No? Okay. Tony, I have questions. Aside from the right-wing groups funding ticket sales here, and Angel Studios energizing its faith-based followers, there you go. Again, people might think of that as being innocuous, but we all know that whenever you paint a movie as either right-wing or faith-based or as a religious movie or anything like that, guess what? It means a lot of people will immediately check out. The Jim Caviezel action thriller is pulling in huge Latino-Hispanic crowd. Oh my goodness, look at that. Wait a minute. Are you saying that this is a diverse movie that's pulling in diverse audiences? Wait, why aren't you giving it the same diversity treatment as you were the R-rated raunchy comedy? R-rated raunchy comedy, you give praise to and you say, I don't understand. Whereas a movie about protecting children has actual diversity and you're not giving it the same play. In fact, you even go on. This is exactly how faith-based movies play. Just because a person in the movie has faith does not make this a faith-based movie. Remember, this movie was actually being produced by 20th Century Fox before Disney took over the rights. They took over the rights. They put this movie on ice. Angel Studios then came in to get the distribution rights. I think they paid about $5 million for then, got the rights from Disney, finished the movie to distribute it, and guess what? Now they're being and actually seeing profits, whereas Disney is still seeing losses for all these other movies. But again, please continue to paint this as a faith-based movie. Gosh. Strongest markets are South and South Central and middle of the country. And again, it's mentioning here about how it's doing very, very well in a lot of different places. It goes on to say total box office weekend is 128.4, 46% off from last year's weekend. But again, notice here, you get one tiny paragraph here. Look at all of the ink that was spent on Joyride. All of the information, all of the time that was spent on Insidious 5 and was spent on Indiana Jones. Tony, bro, I got questions for you. I got a lot of questions for you, and none of them look very good. All right, sorry if that took a while for some people caring more about the box office numbers, but it is an important thing and an important factor to take in, especially when talking about these numbers, because, again, Insidious the Red Door, despite the commentary from earlier, guess what? No matter how you spin it, it is a successful movie, right? This film coming on the number one spot, $32.6 million, $10,000 per screen, whereas Indiana Jones has dropped 56%, which is definitely not the worst numbers that we could possibly see, right? Some people were speculating that we could see upwards of 60+%, but at 56%, guess what? This movie is still not having enough word of mouth to justify its own existence. This movie still costs over $300 million. Remember, the news came out that Doctor Strange 2, shot mostly in the UK, we found out that movie actually cost $350 million to make the movie. Now, they got $50 million back from the UK, which is how we know about this information, how we know they spent a lot more than what was being projected. Remember, we were all told that movie cost $200 million. And again, those were estimates given to us by industry so-called experts. But that $200 million was actually $350, and they actually spent, because of the tax credits of only $300 million. Guess what? That makes us ask the question, okay, Indiana Jones, you're saying, right, the projections are, the estimates are the movie cost $300 million. And then guess what? This movie was also mostly shot in the UK. So we'll find out within a year exactly how much money this movie actually cost. There are already some speculating because of inside sources that the film cost at least $330 to $350 million. But if we see a similar difference between this movie's budget and what we saw with Doctor Strange, guess what? You could actually end up seeing Indiana Jones having costed $400 million when everything is said and done. Let's just say Disney is in a very, very bad strait. But Tony, please continue to call into question the reporting coming from Angel Studios and to continue to ignore places like Walt Disney, etc. Tony. By the way, Nancy, as recording this video, has still not put out her international numbers there. I think that she might be hiding from me, but who knows? Sound of Freedom, though, did come in at a very strong number 3 spot here. And again, he spent more time on Joyride, which came in the number 6 spot domestically. Yeah, it's a new release, but number 6 spot. And again, $5.8 million versus $8 million for Spider-Verse, $9.6 million for Elemental. Tony, bro, you got issues. Sound of Freedom, though, $18.2 million. Very impressive. $40.2 million overall in what is made so far domestically. This film, again, because of the fact that it costs so little, and also because of what Angel Studios actually spent to get the rights to it, it's already profitable in addition to Insidious. Elemental, $9.6 million, 21% drop. And again, these films, especially like Elemental, have actually had pretty strong holds over the course of its run. Because it had such a small start, though, in the end, it's not going to make much of a difference. The film, though it will absolutely percentage-wise have had a much better start compared to its first 2 weeks. Again, talking about potential for it being a chart breaker according to the charting that I use, making more than double of what it made in the first 2 weeks, which again shows strong down-the-run legs. Because it had such a small start and because its budget is so large, it's not going to make a difference in the end. Spider-Verse continuing to add to its overall profits. Again, a huge win there for Sony. Joyride from Lionsgate, no budget being reported yet as of recording of this video. But at $5.8 million, even Tony has to say, that's not very good. I imagine this film probably cost, $20 to $35 million or so? meaning that this movie is probably going to end up being a financial loss. No Hard Feelings continuing to be a loss for Sony, though definitely doing better than what had been expected. 33% hold there. Transformers Rise of the Beast at $5 million, 32% hold. Still not going to be enough. This film has crossed $400 million worldwide, but it still needs to make quite a bit more to break even. Little Mermaid also in the same category as Elemental, where it's done a lot better down the stretch than what had been anticipated. Still, because it costs so much, and a very similar question needs to be asked about this movie as far as what the budget was versus what we were told the budget was. And this film's already financial loss could end up being an even bigger one. Coming in the number 10 spot is Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. Terrible name for a movie. No one really is going to see it. 49% hold is not a terrible hold, but it had a very slow opening weekend, meaning that this film right now on paper is a financial loss. It's on paper a failure, but not for Universal. Universal, again, shout out to Valiant Renegade who's reported on this. Netflix has already paid for the budget of this movie, right? So Universal is not really going to be on the hook for any of these financial losses. So again, this was already a loss on Netflix books anyway because they were spending the money to be able to get it. So Universal's already gotten their budget covered for this. So anything they make is technically profit. That all being said, as an individual film, it is still a failure. No one is really going to go see the film. So I'll still call this a failure, though not a failure necessarily for the studio in Universal. Asteroid City, not a good movie, not one of Wes Anderson's better movies. I didn't personally like it. Hard to track these films, but hey, it's still, for the kind of movie that it is, it's doing fine. The Flash, continuing to be even more abandoned than it already was. Remember, in week 3, we saw mass record amounts of theaters being dropped, another almost 1,000 screens being dropped for this movie. Yeah, this film is also, we thought this film was going to be the biggest flop of the year, and hey, if we get actual numbers for this movie, the $220 million budget, I don't buy that for a second, so we'll have to wait to see what the actual budgets are. But with Indiana Jones likely costing closer to $350 to $400 million, and that's just production budget before you take into account marketing, I think The Flash might be off the hook for being the biggest flop of the year. And then you have a couple other films. One film I did want to note is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, still out in theaters, right? Still out in over 1,000 theaters, still making a little bit of money here and there, and is actually still pushing itself ever closer to $850 million worldwide. Looking at the overall numbers, though, Insidious the Red Door, $64 million worldwide. This film costing pretty much nothing, has already made its money back. So again, shout out to them for being able to make a film that made money. For anyone who says, all the movies are doing bad this year, all the movies are not making money, no one's going to the theater anymore. People are going to the theater. People are going to support movies. You can argue saying not to the same level or degree as in previous years, but the fact is that when studios have actually put out movies with reasonable budgets, and in addition to that have given fans what they've wanted, and have actually tried to entice fans in different ways. I don't know if Insidious is a good movie or not. I'm not really into this franchise whatsoever. However, there is clearly a fan base that shows up. They know the amount of money that they can expect on any given opening weekend. Clearly, this came in better than what even Tony thought was possible, but still, they knew that this film would probably end up in the $50 million plus territory, which is why they only put X amount of money into the actual movie itself. Again, you're able to make profit if you are actually smart. Unlike Disney, which has proven itself to continue to be one of the dumbest studios in the world right now. Again, massive financial failure and loss here coming for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Remember, the film needs to typically make 2.5 times its budget to break even. With the reported $300 million budget, it's likely more than that. And we'll find out next year, Disney. Don't you worry. Officially, we'll find out next year. It's only 0.8 times its budget. 2.5 is not going to be possible for this movie. A best case scenario for this film is that it ends around $500 million. That's a best case scenario. The movie needs to make at least a minimum of $450 plus million to break even. Again, actually not even that. Sorry. It's 2.5 times the budget. So that would be $750 million? Sorry. Yeah, $750 million. Okay. If the best case scenario is $500 million and that is not happening for this movie, and it needs to make $750 to break even, again, that's a best case scenario. Sound of Freedom, talking about best case scenarios, this movie continuing to do very, very well. And again, this did have a budget of around $14.5 million, but that was not on the cost and not on the coffers of Angel Studios, which means that all the money they're getting in is essentially going to be profits for them after the split between the studio and the actual theaters themselves. So kudos to them for being able to make a film that not only is incredibly important and needs to be praised for its message more so than anything else. Again, you can have issues objectively with this movie. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But if you are going to try to paint a picture about this movie with the clear intention to try to drive people away from it, and treat it clearly differently than anything else that's out right now, I'm sorry. That tells me a little bit more about you than you probably want to let on. Elemental, $250 million, again, better than what anyone would have probably expected, but still a far cry from what it needs to break even. Spider-Verse is getting very much on the pathway towards $700 million worldwide, probably by the end of its run. I could see that happening. Joyride, not doing well. Not a lot of joy on this ride. Right, Tony? No Hard Feelings, $67.6 million. Again, glad to see that, Jennifer Lawrence is such a huge draw at the theaters. Transformers Rise of the Beast, $400 million. Sounds nice on paper, but the budget means this film needs to make quite a bit more than that. Ruby Gilman Teenage Kraken, $26 million. Again, on paper, not a success whatsoever. But for the studio, haven't gotten that support from Netflix. Guess what? Good for them. They're going to make at least some money off of it. Asteroid City is doing fine for what it is. The Flash, $261 million. Massive, massive flop. Guardians of the Galaxy, as you can see, $839 million worldwide means this film is on pace, right, to get upwards of $850 million. And again, it's going to be tough to get there because it's been out for quite a long time, 10 plus weeks at this point. So you could end up seeing it. But the fact that this movie especially has had a pretty decent split domestic to international means that this is really the only win Disney has seen this year, and likely the only win Disney will see this year. Going into the charting, because we love charting here over at OMB Reviews, for two movies, we can start to make some projections. First off, Indiana Jones. All right, so at $247 million, right now worldwide, we can project, based off of the typical historical standards, that the movie overall worldwide numbers will be somewhere between 354 million and 495. So what that means is that if the movie doubles what it's made so far, which historically is possible. There's been films that have been able to do it, right? There's films that have been able to even more than double what they've made in the first 2 weeks. Based off of the tracking that we're seeing right now for this movie in pretty much every market, that's not likely going to happen. What we probably will end up seeing in this film getting closer to that minimum, maybe even less, or potentially getting closer to the average, meaning I think $400 million for this movie is, again, there's a chance. Do I think it's likely? Personally, no. I think probably somewhere between 350 and 450 is the range that I would personally give based on what I've seen with this movie and other films, somewhere in that area. But regardless of that, even if it did get to that max, even if it got more than that, even if it's a chart breaker and gets to 500 plus million, guess what? That minimum $300 million budget was probably closer to $350 or $400 million. Disney, we'll find out next year. Far cry from the 750, minimum 750. Again, some people's break-even point is 3 times the budget, meaning the break-even somewhere between 750 and 900 million. So even when you take into account the numbers that were being given, and again, that's just with a $300 million budget, you start to think that this movie possibly costs $400 million. We'll find out next year. Guess what? Now you're talking to a break even on average of $1 billion. This movie is not even going to get to half of that. If you also remind yourself that every other Indiana Jones movie has made $1 billion, when you especially adjust those numbers for inflation and current day value, this movie then is going to be less than half of what any other Indiana Jones film has actually done, including Crystal Skull. So couldn't happen to a nicer company, couldn't happen to what was once a great franchise, and luckily, here on OMB Reviews, we only acknowledge 3 Indiana Jones films as actually having existed. Ruby Gilman, we can also make some projections for, and again, this is one of those weird films because of how the budget was actually gotten as far as who paid for what. So again, shout out to Valiant Renegade for covering this on his channel. But this film, we can still project it'll make somewhere between 38 and 53 million worldwide, which is not very, very good. And again, that $70 million budget was pretty much already paid for by Netflix, so not going to really see losses for them. But even with that being the case, the losses that we would see for this movie in a typical scenario is still nothing compared to what we would see for Indiana Jones, etc. And again, Indiana Jones right now, based on the numbers, so these would be the most conservative estimates of what the losses will be. We're looking at somewhere between $150 and $240 million of losses, and that is the conservative estimate. What I think is more likely true, again, conservative versus the more liberal. I know it sounds political, but it's really not, right? The smallest amount versus what the largest would be. That means the average, the mean, right, between them would be roughly $300 million in losses is what we could probably expect for this movie. And that's just based on the numbers that we have currently. It could get a lot worse if that budget ends up ballooning up to $400 million if we find out more information over the course of the next year. So again, huge loss right there for Disney. As I mentioned before, Insidious 5 is $64 million because of a very, very, very conservative budget of only $16 million. Again, they know what they need to spend on the movie and how many people they can expect coming out opening weekend. Its break even then was only about $40 million. So again, already has done that. 14.4 times the budget, 14.4 million in actual current gain. So it's, again, a financial hit at this point, we could actually say. It's pretty much already gotten to the 16 million that it cost to make the movie. So this film, by the end of its run, will more than double what they spent on it, I would guess. But it's already also 4 times what the budget is, right? What the budget going into the movie was. And so, yeah, that's a huge, huge win for them overall. Sound of Freedom, and again, based off of the production budget, remember that Angel Studios only spent a much smaller amount of money to gain the rights to the movie, which again, huge loss there for Disney. Hope it was worth the money you spent, rather the money that you received from Angel Studio to get the rights to this movie, especially with all the losses that are not going to anywhere come close to what you may have gotten from that deal. But Sound of Freedom at $40.2 million worldwide means $1.6 million in profits based off of the budget, meaning this film's already probably north of $10+ million in the pocket right now for Angel Studio, possibly even more. We don't have a budget for Joyride, as I've mentioned. $5.8 million means that this film probably will end up being a financial loss, but we won't know for sure until we get an actual reported budget. But these are numbers as they stand. And again, if you want to have a closer look at any of these other films, whether it be Elemental, The Flash, again, Flash has to thank Disney right now. Warner Brothers should be thanking Disney, because The Flash was going to be the most catastrophic box office failure of this year. And then Indiana Jones was like, hey, hold my beer. Dial of Destiny was like, hold my beer, because, oh boy, massive, massive failure. But those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts about this? What are y'all's thoughts, especially about Sound of Freedom and how the media is treating Sound of Freedom? I can't say I'm surprised the media is doing this, but Tony, bro, I expected more from you. I mean, I really didn't, but you need to do better. Let's just be honest. You need to do better. But let me know your thoughts about this or any other films I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that fire button. Also, smash the rumble button as well. Lord knows YouTube probably will end up coming after this movie just because of what I had to say about it. But you guys are all great, amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a special shout out to all of my members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off first with my members over on Patreon: Father Luca Illich, Heimir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, check out his YouTube channel by the same name, Laura, the Monomator General's Story, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name as well. To my subscribe star peeps, Zion Voders, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. So thank y'all very much for being my supporters at the Keep of the Bifrost level and above. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out that top link in the video description below to find out ways to sign up to support the channel and to be able to get access to things like the shoutouts, but also to giveaways. I have an exclusive giveaways channel on my Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff, and also access to an exclusive podcast that I do once or twice a month, depending on what I'm able to get accomplished, especially over the course of this crazy, crazy busy summer. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.